Thank you for finding time to be in this lecture. I'm going to talk about data economy, data privacy issues, and also building Canvas apps for which we are sponsoring as Open Learning. It's a very discussion type quote unquote lecture because the topics that I'm going to talk about, I'm certainly not an expert in all the areas. There are many related areas. And frankly, we don't have good answers to all the questions that we are going to ask. And it's important that we think about those questions. So anytime, I would encourage you, even if you're in the classroom, if you can just join at the Zoom link, because you might be able to pose questions through the chat there. And you can have a chat with your other classmates, and that could be helpful. But you can also shout out your question to someone who can type it out to the chat or just convey it to me. So I would love to know what you're thinking and what your questions are. And also, I'm not familiar with this hybrid mode of lecturing. So I have either been present in the classroom and lectured, or everyone was on Zoom. So I don't know how this is going to work out, but we'll figure it out. So I'm Anindya Roy. I'm a data scientist at Open Learning, and I have my background is in education research and physics, and also doing some web development, building edtech type of product or tools. So today we are going to talk about a bunch of related things. We are going to start with Canvas LMS and building apps on that platform. And it's an LMS that MIT has adopted as an entire institute in 2020 after the pandemic hit. But Sloan School of Management, they started using that, I think, in 2017. So as an institute, we have some experience of using it, but it's still pretty fresh. It's still pretty new. And we want you to encourage using that and building stuff on that. So that's one part of it. Then the rest of the lecture, we'll take a very different route, and we'll talk about very different things. We'll start with a survey that some of you might have taken before. It's a survey. It's part of a research project that we have been doing. This would be the third year doing this survey with this group of people. And we have a unique way to understand how the student population is thinking about data economy. In fact, what is it? And if you're not familiar with the term, and part of that would be sort of self-explanatory from the survey. After you are all done with the survey, we'll take a quick look at the what we get from last year's results. I think this thing was a mistake, a quick look at this year's survey that we are not going to do. And then we'll have a long discussion phase where we'll talk about various related topics. Any questions so far? All right. So building apps for Canvas LMS. There is $500 prize on it, which is exclusively for building Canvas apps. So if you get that, please, web lab officers, correct me if I'm wrong. But you might be able to qualify for other prize as well as this prize if you're building something, depending on if you meet other criteria. And the reason for doing that, the reason for building something on Canvas is that we all are using it. You are an expert in using it as the end users of it. And it can potentially make your experience better. And I am just going to give some very potential directions where you can make this if you are so inclined on making something on Canvas. You can, for example, make some productivity / progress tracker type apps if that's important. There could be some niche apps related to very specific tasks, like, let's say, some kind of data visualization or graphing that what you get from Canvas is not very useful. One thing to think about is what kind of collaboration we can think about. So if you look at the architecture of systems like Canvas, it's very it's an individual directed app. So for example, instructors create courses on that, and they are grading students as individuals, and students work on them usually on their own. But are there opportunities to make something which is more collaborative, which we don't know how we would just connect grading to that, but are there unmet needs there? So you'll be able to tell us more about what that could be useful for. And a good way to start would even be to ask your fellow classmates to see if there is something that some people need that we don't have on Canvas. And a similar aspect is to talk to your professors as well. If you think that there are some tools that could have helped them teach better, even if they are not thinking about it, even if they are not aware of such tools existing, but you wish that they could use something that could have that could have made the teaching process easier for you. So think of this as something that where you have some power in terms of changing the technical or the technological system. And if it's so, how do you go about that? And we would like to know, we would like to help you with any of the building process. If you want, we'll be able to connect you to other people who are more aware of the technical aspects of it if we are not able to help them help that ourselves. Some of the resources that could be helpful to you is that Canvas has a pretty useful REST API, and the information is out there. There are various kind of wrappers available for interacting with the with that API. The Canvas API from UCF Open, that's University of Central Florida. So that's the Python wrapper, for example. And that usually is pretty useful in getting data out of the REST API. You can potentially create a token from here, from which you can access different data. Usually for you, it would be just accessing your own personal data, but even that could be something to start on. One more, if you're looking for possible examples, you have this Edu App Center on Canvas, where you might be able to see products that can connect with Canvas. And that might give you some ideas about what you might want to build. And finally, there is something called Learning Tools of Interoperability, LTI, which is a protocol which most of EdTech softwares, EdTech companies follow. And that usually helps, if you're building some product, some EdTech product, to talk to different kind of products. So it could be you might want to use Canvas along with some other product, like let's say Gradescope, and they have different purposes, but they might need to share some same kind of data. So for example, the same student could be using the Canvas and submitting an assignment, which should be assessed in Gradescope. So Gradescope needs to know who that student is without knowing necessarily all the details about the students. So Learning Tools Interoperability, LTI, that allows transfer of scoped data, often in pseudonymized forms, so that your privacy is protected, but what you build, they can talk to other similar apps which could be connected. So that's something that that is good to know about if you are interested in this space, and not necessarily you are interested in Canvas, but what you are building that you might want to interact with other similar systems. So this is all I have about Canvas. And oops. Yes, so this is all I have about Canvas, and I am around. I have other people from ISNT and Open Learning and Canvas community who would be able to help you should you be interested in building some apps on that. And if you are building something like that, then there is a $500 prize, as I mentioned. That's pretty much what I have in mind for Canvas. do you have any questions so far? A quick question for the people in the classroom. Are you all able to hear me? Are you all able to ask me a question if you want to ask me a question? Okay. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is for you to take a survey on data economy. So some of you might have taken it in last 2 years. And for those of you, it's a choice. If you don't want to take it, that's fine. If you remember what it was, we are taking too many surveys these days. But for those of you who have not taken it, I would really appreciate if you can take it. And those of you who have taken it, if you want, that would be a great data point, because we are asking if you have taken it already in the survey. And what is data economy? I have copy pasted the information, the definition from Wikipedia, and it's still a relatively new term. We are still not super familiar with various aspects of it. And we will talk about it in great detail in rest of the talk. But, I'm being purposely somewhat vague about it because I don't want to cloud your judgment/opinions about it if you're not already super familiar with it. I'm expecting all of that to come out through the survey, and then we'll talk about it in great length. So with that, here's the survey. And also one more thing, I'll be sharing the slides with you. But since the slide contains a lot of information about what we are going to talk about in the survey, I don't want you to be able to see those things so that you are relatively unblemished about all those things. And this is purely because we are following a research protocol, even if it feels like kind of artificial. And the survey is completely anonymous, and it's your yes, hold on. Oops, never mind. Let me see. So you're welcome. So yeah, so the survey is anonymous. It's available only for people who are over 18. Please don't take it otherwise. And it's completely voluntary. It has absolutely no impact on your grades or anything. It's not going to be shared with your, like I'm not going to share it with any of your instructors. I don't know who your instructors are in any case. And it's running for the third year, and the longer a survey like this runs, it really helps us understanding student perspective on this. Okay, so with that, I will shut up for next 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, to give you enough time to work on the survey, and then we'll come back. Let me know if you have any problem accessing the survey. I see responses are trickling in. Maybe I'll give a couple more minutes if you need that, and then we'll close the survey and move on. It's a great question, Daniel. Yes, a lot of activists are working actively on this problem. And we will discuss some of what's coming up as a result in this talk. All right. Do you need more time, or can we move on? Okay, I'm getting a few thumbs up, so maybe it's a good time to move on. Let me share my screen again, and we'll. All right. So now, let me see. I would like to share the link to the slides as well. So if you want to use that to take a look at, what we're going to talk about. So yeah, so a quick response to Daniel's question about if anyone is working on this problem, and no change seems to be happening in this front. I would like to know what you think as a group, but it's a challenging problem, and at some level, it's a really early stage of data economy, and it's kind of a wild west of lack of regulation, semi-legal / quasi-legal areas. No one knows whether something is right or wrong to do, and there's a land grab in terms of personal data that's going on. And at the same time, there are a lot of activists, a lot of legal advocates who are working on this. So I would strongly advise against being pessimistic about it. And this is part of the reason, like, we need to educate ourselves more on that, and about possible implications. And you stand in a unique position because you, as consumer of data, like we all as consumers of data, we might know how our data are being used. On the other hand, you with your education are also going to be the creators of that data, of that kind of systems, which would collect the data and all that. So like having all that perspective is also very useful, as not only as a general member of the society, but as creators of such systems. So I would discuss some of the results from last 2 years survey, and I have, we collected the data here, but I analyzed it with my colleague Aaron Kessler, and who is also at Open Learning. And we are planning on publishing the results somewhere. We are working on that, but some of the results are here. So I asked you about this level of comfort questions and on various data types. And there we saw in this plot, we see the green is with green squares there with the percentage who felt comfortable in that data type. The red is about neutral, and the blue circles are uncomfortable. Sorry, I think I said green is uncomfortable, but green is comfortable and blue is uncomfortable. And there are some trend that was surprisingly similar in both years, and most of the data were, and that is surprising that they were similar. At the same time, if you think about it, many of our attitudes towards privacy or all that don't change that frequently. So from that perspective, there was not that much of a surprise. And we were reassured by the robustness of the responses. So one thing we see here that we are more concerned, or you expressed more concerns about, that's great. I can't really see the thing because of, okay. We can see more people being uncomfortable with communication data or search history data or financial data as opposed to educational data. And that's kind of interesting because, for example, educational data has some kind of legal protection. Yes, so to Crystal's question, how many people responded? If you're asking this year, I think so far I got 24 responses. 24 responses, out of which 2 or 3 might be mine. And that's actually it would be super duper useful if you can, spread the word about this survey to other students who are in this lab. But yes, all the people so far have been just from this lab. And in last 2 years, together, we have about 130 responses. And so that's like about 60 or 65 per year. So I think this year, the response level is a little low, but if you can spread it around among your other participants, that would be fantastic. And these are all web lab students. We plan to take it to other people as well, to other disciplines, to other universities. And before we do that, we wanted to have a robust data set from here and also understand, no survey is perfect when they're first rolled out. And we believe that's the case with this survey as well. But we don't necessarily know how we need to improve that. And that's why this conversation with you as a group is super important to us. So, and please keep these questions coming. They're very helpful to me. So the second thing is these are all individual responses. The next thing I wanted to check was how these responses correlate with each other. So we see that, for example, the correlation is super high between search history data and communication data, or search history data and voice data. And that's somewhat understandable that there are probably some kind of buckets of concerns which are together. We also asked about your level of comfort for sharing educational data with various campus entities and other educational entities. And we see some results which are, we can expect. For example, students are okay with sharing their attendance records with instructors, or with the sharing their course grades with the registrar's office, because if you're not, I'm kind of curious about what the other 25% thinks, but that's a separate question. If you think registrar's office should not have your grade, then who would? But this is kind of, you can have that kind of some ambiguity in these responses, and that's part of it. But then there are other trends that are very interesting because, for example, students don't really want their campus Wi-Fi access records or campus facilities access records to be shared with third-party services. Now, I don't know if it's news to you, but like for example, all the payment gateways where you are, for example, paying with card with like at your dining services, or for example, when you are swiping your card to enter a building, it might be different from one university to another, but in most cases, they are managed by third parties and they are gathering a massive amount of data. And whether they are protected under FERPA or not, by the way, FERPA is the Educational Data Protection Act, the federal act, that depends. So there is a lot of ambiguity about the data type, and there is a mismatch in how we want our data to be shared as students about our educational data. And frankly, what we consider our educational data to be. Like, for example, whatever you do in your campus, would that be considered educational data? Not necessarily. And that's something that we need to figure out. We also asked you about the advantages and disadvantages of data economy, as you see. And the first thing to see there is that we got so far a pretty nuanced response. By the way, I think it's pretty obvious. All the results that I'm presenting here, that's from the last 2 years, 2020 and 2021. The things that you have responded just now, they're not part of this yet, because obviously I have not done the analysis. So the questions about advantages and disadvantages, they are pretty nuanced, as in they're well distributed. Almost all of the responses previously, they pointed out both advantages and disadvantages. There were very few responses which were advantages only or disadvantages only. But there were a lot more in the intersection of the Venn diagram. And if we look at the advantages, there were points like advancement in society, benefits to personalization, getting access to free products and services. It generates wealth. It helps with informed decision-making. Whereas the disadvantages are about privacy and the sense of losing privacy, the fear of being manipulated by people who have our personal data, the fear of being discriminated against based on our various vulnerabilities. There were questions about security breaches and data theft, lack of choice, being vulnerable in general, and no code is, we could not assign a code to that. Some responses are just very difficult to code. There were fears about results or algorithms being biased themselves. And also there were some points about surveillance capitalism. So I think that is all the data that's easy to share from last 2 years surveys. Any questions so far? Okay, so so now we are going into more of a discussion phase of this, based on what we have found from the surveys and what we learned from different different approaches to this new idea of data economy. So the first thing that I want to point out about that, and this is to structure our discussion, is, and by the way, like I have changed this talk quite a bit from last year's based on the feedback I got from last year. So last year, I mostly talked about the problems that exist, not so much about various legal pathways that we are trying to develop and their shortcomings or not shortcomings, etc. So this time I'm trying to make it a little bit more encompassing of those topics. But I would appreciate if I also get feedback this year, like the last year. So there are a lot of overlapping themes in these topics. So, okay, what do you think about the problem of user data being stored with inadequate security measures and as a result leaking out into the public space? So I think that's a terrible thing, first of all. But that also ties very closely to this topic. Like, when we are talking about data privacy / data economy, there is this two aspect of what leads to our concerns. So one is this clearly illegal use of this this data, which for example we are finding here, like the data being stored with inadequate security measures, and that's leaking out. Or there are hackers, there are phishing emails, and all ways of illegitimately getting access to your data and your records and financial records and other things. And that's clearly illegal. And that, I would argue that that's in a way more protected, even if that could be hard to implement, because often there are legacy systems, there are inadequate security measures, there are more and more, it's a cat and mouse game of people finding out some kind of security loopholes, and then big companies and other companies are trying to scramble to patch them. But on the other hand, there is this other aspect of legal/quasi-legal use of personal data. And that's part of this whole personal data economy, or not personal data economy, the data economy that is built on. So that's, for example, part of, we have the use of Google Drive or Gmail, because in a way we are paying for that with our personal data to Google, and Google can advertise to us. That's the very simple, economic model that we have knowingly or unknowingly made peace with. Now, what are the repercussions of that, and how does that pan out? So that's something to think about, the illegal versus legal aspect of things. Then the other aspect to think about is who is using the data. So for example, there are private corporations which could be using that for various purposes, starting with, like, let's say, serving ads, which are more personalized, to something that could be a lot more, futuristic, or we have not known about how that could be used. There are government agencies which collect data, which buy data from data brokers. There are universities who could be using data from students, which might be gathered from learning analytics systems and all that. And the other theme is we have differential attitude towards different data types, as we have seen in the, for example, in this plot, that we have less concern about educational data compared to, let's say, communication data or search history data. And in a way, that's interesting if you think about it, why we care so much about one data as opposed to another. And is that because we feel that we have less vulnerability about that? Possibly. And that's something to explore as a group. So any question about any of these themes? So for the purpose of this talk, maybe, I see that I think we have about 15 more minutes. Is that correct? If Mufaro or someone could confirm, that would be great. So we will move on and focus mostly on the, the legal/quasi-legal use of personal data. And that's connected to something, which is called privacy paradox. Actually, that's a very interesting question. I actually can address that, whether we can ever own our own data. There are some questions and some advances towards that. I will come to that. There is so-called personal data economy, where you can potentially trade your own data. So data becomes a tradable commodity. And what are the repercussions of that? Like, who owns that data? Like, for example, if you are more vulnerable, would that give you the same amount of power? And can you actually price that data adequately when you don't have information on how that data can be used? So that leads to very, very interesting questions. And I encourage you to look at the reference that I have included in that slide. So this leads to this whole idea of privacy paradox, where what we say is often in contrast with what we actually do. And we say we want privacy, but we act accordingly. If not, why? And some people argue that protecting one's own privacy is as important or as essential as you would respect others. However, that's often very difficult to implement in a big data economy. And that's partially connected to the fact that a lot of us don't even understand, how the extent of data that are being collected and how they're being tied to us. So do we have any question or comment about, like, what could lead to this kind of privacy paradox, or what is your take of why that exists? Is there any comment on that? Would you like to share anything on that? Right. Giving data away is very convenient. We want to live a life where we have access to these products, and if we don't give our data, then we don't get to use many of these services. And that brings to some of the interesting questions, like some of the laws, like California Consumer Protection Act, CCPA. If you live in California, or if you come to California, you might see that many websites will have this, like, do not sell my data cookie notice that would come up. And that leads to a question, like, if everyone said, do not sell my data, how would that company survive if their only business model, only revenue model is selling people's personal data? So it immediately raises question about, how we are thinking about laws to prevent these things. Is that even scalable? So some of the other points about this privacy paradox is we do not necessarily know the extent of how much data are being collected. We do not know how they might be used and how that can affect us. Like, I'm not talking about the MIT population, MIT student population, but at large, there have been studies where people just cannot fathom that their personal data of what they're doing are connected from all different sources. And you have a very good profile of everyone, essentially. Would the integration of more immersive systems in our daily life present an increase in this divide between a desire for privacy and the convenience slash economy of giving it away? That's a very good question. I can't say I have an answer to that, but I would like to know what you think of it as a group. Like, if anyone of you have would like to chime in, please go ahead and answer to this question. I honestly don't know. And same about the question about Web3. Like, I have other concerns about Web3 in terms of, it being proposed as a decentralized system, even if a lot of people who are proposing that, they seem to own a significant fraction of it. So we don't know. I honestly don't know about that. So there was a recent controversy of Jack Dorsey of Twitter responding to some tweet from someone else, and it's about Andreessen Horowitz, how much they control Web3, etc. So contact me later if you want reference to that. I don't have any handy reference to it. Anyway, so in terms of some privacy laws, do I personally know anyone who values privacy highly enough to refuse any data collecting service? No, I don't. And I myself don't live that way. And there is an extremely interesting article, somewhat dated, by the journalist Kashmir Hill, from who is now at New York Times, and she wrote about how she tried living without, like, using the big six tech firms for 7 days, and she found that it's essentially impossible to do. Like, for example, where, I don't know, 70% or 50% of all the websites are hosted on AWS. If you're not using Amazon, like, well, sure, don't order something from Amazon, but you're still going to check a website. So it's very, very interesting. But then, just because we are using this service, that does not mean that we have to be vulnerable about our personal data. And that's where some of the laws come in, and the question about how we might be able to protect ourselves. So there is sweeping laws like General Data Protection Regulation in EU, GDPR, which is not without its flaws, but it stands in stark contrast to the US, which have a patchwork of various laws. So instead of giving an umbrella law about privacy, about data privacy, it protects specific populations or specific themes in the US. And then there are some laws, some states, there are 3 states currently, which have more comprehensive consumer data privacy laws, but we'll talk about what the shortfalls are regarding that. So in US, you can, I would strongly encourage you to go and check this New York Times article, which has a very, very good, primer on all of these things, and this litany of different laws and how they still can't protect all these different repercussions that could come up. So, for example, many of these US consumer data privacy laws are business model affirming. So the businesses just have to notify you that they are selling your data. You can't really necessarily stop that. And that's kind of interesting, but that's probably educational. So I think there is some benefit to it. I don't know. GDPR, for example, does not cover government or law enforcement agencies' use of your personal data. So that's it's also for EU citizens only. But that's something to know, that if government is collecting the data, that's not necessarily covered there. There is also CCPA, don't sell my data. Is that a scalable model? I don't think so. If everyone said, don't sell my data, then how would that company survive if that's the only business model? And if so, then what kind of other business models should we think about? So in the same article, I have taken 3 links from there. These are about the implications of not having proper privacy laws. And here, I would come back to the one of you mentioned in the chat. Like, you see, these are not necessarily illegal use of data, because there is no law explicitly prohibiting any entity from using the data this way. So a priest resigned after he was outed based on his Grindr usage. US government is buying location data from a Muslim prayer app. And opioid addiction treatment apps, they were found to be sharing sensitive data with third-party party apps. So it's kind of, in all these cases, you see it's dangerous, or at least super duper creepy, or it's just not right, but there is not necessarily illegal. Would I say it's true that once the data is collected, it's not possible for any law to protect it from unauthorized access? Well, yes or no. I mean, that's where it gets interesting. Hypothetically speaking, we might be able to protect it against unauthorized access. The problem is, with authorized access, what are they able to do? So the first example of the priest's Grindr usage data being shared, there was nothing unauthorized about that. So sure, unauthorized access, hacking, ransomware, all that are massive issue, as I'm not downplaying that from any level. The other concern is about the perfect legal / semi-legal use of it. There is only like the norm maybe prohibiting it or not. How do we think about it? And of course, like, I think we'll have to protect the system in general. And I also would like to be more of an optimist, and I think that it is possible for laws to protect us, because if we make it less appetizing for such data to be monetized, then there would be less interest in collecting such data, and that might prevent it from falling into wrong hands, like the pure illegal use. So right now, that's a lot more possible, because this is the standard way of financing various tech tools and various tech companies. So I am skipping from the breakout rooms, because I'm not sure if that's going to work, because some of you are not on Zoom, and some of you are, and some of you are in classroom. But if you feel that you want to try out breakout room, give me some show of hands. Otherwise, we can do this discussion quickly here. Also, someone could mention how much more time I have for this talk. Claire Mufaro? Around 5 minutes. Okay. So let's skip this. I really wanted to know, and maybe in next 1 minute, if you can do that, that would be great, or in the chat as we are going on with it. If you think, so there's this bad actor perspective, and there's this legal / quasi-legal use of personal data. From these two aspects, if you could just quickly point out on the chat what kind of data, what type of data you'll be more concerned from one versus the other, that would be fantastic, because we have not separated them out in our survey. And I have a feeling that, let's say I might be more concerned about my financial data falling into wrong hands, out and out, illegal use of it, versus my location data or my sleep data as collected by my phone. It could be this quasi-legal use. It could be connected to, I don't know, my heart disease risk down the line based on how I sleep. So, so if you can chime in on the chat, that would be great. But that's the discussion that I think we have to skip, because I want to mention this. There are these new developments. So there are, it answers some of your questions about how we are thinking ahead. And these are not without their problems either. But, as I said, Wild West, we are still figuring out how to move forward. So paying for privacy. So there are some apps which apparently do not sell our data. So for example, you may know of ProtonMail, which is super duper privacy protecting. And at the same time, you have to pay for it, like most other products they used to be. And then there are also apparently apps where you can purchase privacy. So they have an option of selling your data, or you can pay them so that they don't sell your data, and you can choose that. Now there are also users who are brokering, who are approaching the users directly for money or some other kind of rewards. And this is happening right in front. So you are not dealing with some shadowy third-party brokers that, let's say you go to New York Times, and New York Times selling your data to some other company that you have never heard of, but they're coming to you directly, and you decide how much to charge them for it. And it's a so-called free marketplace of your personal data, and you choose what to do with it. Now, there are concerns about that as well. And I would like you to maybe take a look at this Columbia Law Review article. Who would be disadvantaged in that system, and how do you even price your personal data when there is information asymmetry? So information asymmetry is like when you're going to buy a used car, the car dealer knows a lot more about the car than you do. So when you are going there, you don't really know how much that car actually costs or should cost, and you have to take the car dealer's word for the face value. So it's same for the personal data. I really don't know my sleep pattern, as might be picked up by my cell phone, how that can be priced. So what would I pay for it? I don't know. So not to mention, like, if I don't have enough money, then I might be more at a disadvantage for this. So I see that I am almost on time to finish this. I would really be interested in hearing your take on this very hypothetical thing. Like, I don't know if anyone is building that, but let's say at MIT, we're building a learning analytics system. And we can see that there could be some benefits as can come from learning analytics system. There could be some concerns. So if you can go to these Google Forms and fill it out in next minute or so, then I would be able to share that result with you. Does that sound good? Thumbs up? Thumbs down? Yes, I can send that link on the chat. Okay, fantastic. In the interest of time, I don't want to take up too much time from from the next speaker. So I see that results are coming, and I guess you can see my screen. Yes, so that's a very important point. Like maybe how now the system sounds good, but how you're being flagged. But more importantly, it's not just being flagged, but what we do with that flagging. Like how do we allocate resources? How do we help people with that? And that's the thing that we need to think about. So this is extremely interesting, and thank you so much for filling out this survey. And surveys at this point. You are filling out many surveys, and this is useful. Let me see if there is anything else. Well, you have access to the talk. If you are interested in building Canvas apps, please reach out. There are all these afterthoughts about things that we should do as a society. Don't lose hope. That's very important. And thank you, and good luck with WebLab. If you have any questions about any of these things, just reach out. If you have feedback to the talk, please go ahead and submit your feedbacks here. And that's it. I think that's all I have to say. I will. Oh, I think I can save a copy from here. All right. If you don't have any other questions, I'll wrap up here. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.